Good morning, everyone. So I think my voices are good to everyone here. Okay. In the last session, which I talked about concept of public policy. Now we are going to have discussions on the concept of public policy and the different theories. That was in part of second unit. There was a block two theories of public policy. Okay. You can consider it as a unit 3 and 4. Now we are going to have discussions about an discussion on decision making theory, as well as we are also understanding these classes about elite theory and as well as group theory. Let me take it as in decision making theory. What is the decision making theory? Is it is in the last sessions which I was telling, Chester Ben and in a public administration thinkers like Albert Simon, okay, Chester Bernard, and all of the thinkers who have contributed in the political science, especially in the field of public policy. I think in the first, and in the class which I've given an introductions about what is the meaning of public policy. Public policy is a something according to the particular definition, a connection between one person to a connection between people and the government is called it as a public policy. Okay, connection between government and peoples is called public policy. Okay, so here is that once again you can use
Okay. So let me take it as in what is an decision making and pure science in politics. You know, it has been claimed by many, specifically by Robert Dahl, and the decision making process constitute a pure science of politics. Now, the question is what is mean by pure science is important. Dahl says that earlier times, pure science of politics denoted an evolution, a normative analysis of politics. Because you know that in so nature of decision making theory, if you see, one theory which will understands about in Sinder's theory of decision making. The central idea of the Sinders, if you could take it up, you will understand the meaning of the concept of this theory. Okay, what Sinder says with respect to the public policies here is that in the most of the situations after Second World War, many things has brought in changes. And after Second World War period witnessed as a revolution and the thought system of a political science. We have already touched on behavioralism in the last semesters. I think you might have discussed about behavioralism, structural behavioralism, communications theory, and all of that. So now she'll focus on attention Sinder's approach to study of political science, which is commonly known as a decision-making theory approach to the study of politics. Mid-50s, if you could take it as, Richard Sidhan published a series of writings whose chief and objective was to propagate the importance of decision-making approach. His decision-making theory can be explained in the form of following points. First one, we know that the general system theory of David Easton's and the structural functional approach of Gabriel Allman and other related theories are more or less in scientific nature, which means that all these theories and deal with those elements in their static. But Sinder's point of view, the society is not only the complex but also dynamic. If so, the real approach to study of politics would be the conceptualize the analysis that it can hope for the dynamic aspects of the society. And you know that Sinders therefore claims that decision-making approach is dynamic. Always it keeps on changes. Doesn't mean, see, for example, 100 years ago, the thought process of an individual was different. At presently, if you could see, the thought process of humans is totally different. Well, the decision makers make decision. They consider all the situations. If they fail to do so, this decision will not achieve acceptability and credibility. For example, see, if I tell you the one example, any of a decision making, if it could lose the reliability and that it is no more into the scientific. For example, see, the basically a scientific meaning itself is a very, very important. So as we consider decision making theory as to be a scientific, well, how it has to be there? It has to be very important and dynamic, where it should consider every ideas of the society and what it is going to make out. So the second aspects, if you could see, it has been observed by the Cinder, the decision-making process has been playing a very crucial role, part in the administration of any business organization or governmental department. But it is unfortunate that none took care of analyzing the concept of retail. Only in the 50s of the last century, two persons, one is an Herbert Simon and Chester Bernard, dealt with the decision-making concept. Even these two thinkers also very popular in the public administration, as it is a field of one of the branches of social sciences. Simon's model of man, Bernard's the functions of executive, were published subsequently in the 1957 and 58 respectively. Sinders draws our attention to important points. One is decision-making plays an important role in any business organization, governmental department, that it cannot be neglected and not all. For example, see, without in decision-making, when it comes to the point of an Indian political system, you know, most of the politicians which actually believes in the kind of a promise making. The promise making is a something that, you know, which, you know, at the time of before coming into the power, every persons will make it out in decision. So in keeping in view of an implementation of the decision, if you could see, and all this and promises and all of that, the government has to go under the decision. So how the decisions has to be done? You know, a decision today, what it makes, and without ample of opinions of the public, if any decisions made by the government of concerned state, that it will be in fluff. Okay, it will be in fluff, and it is going to become an unused for the people. So as in the words of Chester Bernard and Herbert Simon, these are all the two thinkers which confessed that, you know, decision making, it's a very, very important aspect, that it should consist of a scientific method. One has to have these kind of an, you know, that an idea is about in all of that, it has mentions that. When it comes to the point of, you know, that in what it has said it in the Simon's model of man, in the 1950, 57, 58, they made it in very important to this theory. Next one is that models of decision making, if you could see, the first one is a rational actor model, the second one incremental model, and the third process, if you could say, bureaucratic organization model, belief system model, and all of that, isn't it? These are all about one thing. Next one, elite theory and group theory. I think I have explained in the last session itself. We are going to have discussions on the models of public policy, rational and comprehensive model. Basically, the models of the public policy, which is divided into the two components. One is the rational public policy. Another one is that, you know, comprehensive public policy. What is a rational public policy? What is a comprehensive policy? We try to understand and right now. Rationality and rationalism are two words of often found in used in social sciences literature. The basis of a rational model, rationalist theories, those are being rooted in the ways of neutral and objective knowledge in human society. At the basis of an idea is that human society can and should be resolved in the rational and scientific manner by gathering all of the information that it can found in a problem, followed by processing them and obtaining by applying the most efficient answer. The several analysts have adhered the model to try to improve by the examination all possible options and their cost. The improved model is called the rational comprehensive model. Rationality has been and preoccupations of philosophers for centuries ago. but the idea of rationality has been central in the theory and the practice decision-making process. The concept of rationality has been key factor in the policy-making process after Second World War. However, rationality is considered to be as a yardstick of wisdom in the policy-making. The rationality concept, however, and emphasize the policy making as a choice among the policy alternatives and rational ground. Robert Havin observed that rational theory of public policy is the one which is designed to maximize the net value achievements of the people. Rationality, it is an applied to the public policy, has its roots in the constructions of the economist. And also at the same time, if you could see another concept, if I'm telling you, you will understand easily that because the rationality process, if while making of policies, if anything, while making of public policy, there are two things are very, very important. One is a rational public policy as well as comprehensive public policy. When it comes to the comprehensive public policy, it consists of everything with respect to the policy making. Such as, rational public policy, it is consists of a rationality, such as, for example, why do we are making a policy? How many people are going to get claim from this policy? What is exactly the importance of this public policy? All those things, it is an important to make us to understand. But in terms of a comprehensive policy, it's a policy where it considered all the aspects of the society, which is going to become very, very important to us. Before going to have in discussions on the comprehensive policy, one need to understand about characteristics of the rational policy. Rational policy, once again, I'm telling rational policy is just something which it consists of a rationality. For example, while making of policy, how to make and for what to make and for whom to make, how much it has to be on time and tenure, everything in terms of consists of it's a kind of a rational policy. The rational policy is also called as an errorless policy, absence of error policy. In order to select a rational public policy, the makers should know information and following some rules and drawer prescribed certain. The author of a political science, one of them, then is a drawer prescribed the certain requirements to public policy in selecting the rational policy. If you could see the importance of that, the first one, but the rational model of a decision making will follow the process and orderly path from problem to solution. The second one, know the society value preferences and the relative weights. And the third one, know all the policy alternative available in the particular time. And the fourth one, while making of a rational policy, there should be an ample of information gathered for analysis during the decision-making process. If there is no proper information, there is no existence of the better policy. So while making of a rational policy, one has to have an in-depth of information. With this, there is a possibility of making of a better policy. The another aspects of that, if you could see, policymakers should aware about all the consequences that would follow from the selections of each alternative and investigated. This model will satisfy conditions of the logical consistency and deductive completeness, must calculate the ratio of achieved and sacrificed to societal values for every policy alternative. Finally, the policy makers will select the alternative and the based in maximum the thing. Decision making will be an objective, unbiased and based on maximizing facts. The policymakers should be aware of the consequences that follow from this selection of each alternative and research. This model will satisfy conditions of logical consistency and deductive completeness. Must calculate the ratio of achieved that sacrifice to societal values for every policy alternative. Finally, the policymakers will select the alternative which is the maximized, most efficient, and useful alternative to attain the goals and objective. This rationality assumes that the value preferences society all can be known and weighed in. It's not enough to know and how weigh the value of this thing and all of the things, isn't it? Simon's bonded rationality, if you could see, Simon stands out in leading contributor to the development of policy approach. His work, administrative behavior, was become so popular, is central to idea of rationality in decision making. His concern with the human decisions making has centered on the idea of rationality, which is limited but not irrational and bounded rationality. After studying various models of man, Simon proposes a new model of decision making man, which he refers to as satisfying man. That is, a decision maker who, because of the limits of his cognitive and analytical abilities, accepts alternatives that are merely satisfactory or sufficient in regard to his aspiration levels. Consequently, he rejects the concept of economic man. Other and transitional theories are they founded in the three unrealistic assumptions that the decision makers he has to knowledge about all the possible alternatives as well as this future consequences. He must have an unlimited computational ability. He has the capacity to put overall possible consequences. For Simon, management is equivalent to decision making. He has identified three stages in the overall process of making of decision, such as the following: intelligence activity, that is finding occasions of this decision, and design activity, that is identifying and developing, analyzing the possible courses of an action. The third one, if you could take it under the Simon bounded rationality theory, the choice activity is in selecting a particular course of action from the available. The choice is very important. It plays a very major role in order to making the bounded rationality theory of Thomas and Simon. The next one, which I'm going to tell you, Thomas Dye. It's a very famous and thinkers and political scientist who talks about the concept of this in public policy that becomes a very, very important to us understand. Thomas Dye, the concept of rationality is espoused to such an extent to many and types of rational decision models ought to be found in the literature of social sciences. Thomas Dye has given an example for rational approach to decision system that facilitate rationality in policymaking. Thomas Dye equates rationality with efficiency in his words. Policy is rational when it's most efficient. That is, if the ratio between the values and achieves and values in sacrifice says that the idea of efficiency involves the calculations of social, political, economical, as well as other things. When it comes to the point of Thomas Dobbs' ideas and the public policy, he further says that the idea of efficiency involves the calculations of social, political, economics, and value sacrifice achieved by the public policy, not just those can be measured in monetary values. Key political policymakers should be rational in order to be, and that a rational decision-making process. And instead of making an idle decisions, and Simon observed policymakers break the complexity of problems into small and understanding parts. Choose the option that is best satisfactory and avoid unnecessary uncertainty. Herman Simon for the notes, although individuals are extremely rational, their rationality is bounded by limited cognitive and emotional and capabilities. Lindbaum and model rational man, if you could, he also has added his suggestions in the public policy. And one, if you could see, Charles Lindbaum criticizes the role of comprehensive rationality in the policy making process. As the state speaks about a challenge its approach faces, it shows that the limit of truly rational policy making, the limitations of urging the best available evidence requires research to develop recommendations necessary to making rational policy making. So as if you could see, the Lindbaum models an idea which have confessed that the policies are very, very important, where one has to have an importance into that in order to development of it. So this was an ideas and rational bounded theory by Simon, as Lindbaum, Thomas Dye, all these authors who have contributed in the policy science of the political science. It becomes a very, very important to understand in the welfare of these days, isn't it? If you could see the advantages of and disadvantages of rational model. First, let me explain about an advantages of rational model. Rational model, the policy making which consists of full of information. It works in facts and practicality. It never exposed to in terms of imagination based, so that everything what they are doing and what they have to do it, they know it and very clearly. For that, such as these theories and enable some kind of an advantages and disadvantages, If you see the first rational advantages, you can understand very easily how they are explaining all about it. Let me tell you. And the first one, advantages of rational theory. This is the first one. And it says that the rational method infuses the decision-making process with discipline, consistency, and logic. And it consists of logic, it consists of discipline, it consists of, and you know that consistently. Rational decision making is based on scientifically obtained information. Hence, this decision making model can reduce the chance of errors, uncertainties, assumptions, and subjectivity and distortion. The rational model can also reduce the risk of failure because the evaluation and selection process of this approach are based on sane and logic information and knowledge. Rational's model policy making can help the decision makers to deal with a difficult problem in the complex environment. The model is a well-defined step-by-step approach that required defining problems, identifying the weighting and decision criteria, listing out the various, alternatives, deliberatives, and present and future consequences of each alternative, and rating catch an alternative in each, and criterion. The issue will be addressed by breaking down into easy steps, and all aspects of the issue will be considerable possible solutions to make the final decision. What are the disadvantages in terms of rational policy making? When it comes to the point of the environment of policy progress, particularly the lower influence system, renders it possible for them to see accurately why and in way many social wills, particularly those values which have no active and powerful proponents. Huge investments in existing programs and policies prevent policymakers from reconsidering alternative goals foreclosed by precision design. The third disadvantages in the policy making, if you could see, one is that the third one, policymakers are not motivated to make decisions on the basis of societal goals. Okay. And the next one is that, but instead of try to maximize their own rewards, status, money, re-election, and power extra. Many conflict values cannot be compared and weighted. It is impossible to compare or weigh the value of individual dignity against a tax increase. There are many obstacles to collect all the data required to know all possible policy and alternatives in all of them. So this is very, very important where you need to understand. So along with the next chapter, if you go here, you will understand about incremental model. What is incremental model? The incremental model was developed by Charles E. Lindblom for the first time. According to that incremental model, the decision-making process is solving a problem is broken down into small steps. The process of then moving between the steps is known as a muddling through. Okay, muddling through, and is based on the combination of experience, intuition, guessing, and using different techniques. And in the incremental model, all these things, guessing, work also is there, and as well as that in the process of that an intuition will be there, and kind of an urgent differential will be there. A small number of alternatives and consequences considered as each stage of decision making process. As a result, the cost of making decision are minimized as each decision and each step proposes a small changes. The immediate effect is minimal, usually not disruptive. The incremental model is a simple and flexible, is often easier to each, that in a consensus between different stakeholders, and limiting the number of alternatives and consequences usually self-acceptable. So if you see, incremental model is a something model where it cherishes the policy making in the right way. By rejecting the rational comprehensive model decision making that call the careful articulation of all goals and full consideration of all actors. Charles I. Lindblom essay, The Science of Muddling Through 1959, inaugurated a new approach understanding the public policy, while Lindblom used the word successive limited comparison rather than incrementalism. This new approach argued that means and ends are decided simultaneously and subsequently. Comparison are restricted on the marginal changes existing policy and not made among the possible alternatives. The approach will appropriate test of a good policy's ability to make a decision based on the most conservative limitations of that. Lindblom's model, however, in many ways address from a different angle The reservations and the Simon had about a rational model, including his own rational comprehensive version. Lindbaum explicitly lists some of these as failure of adaptations of a rational comprehensive method. In and Braybook and Lindbaum's view, Simon's rational comprehensive method is not adequate, adapted to man's limited problem solving capacity, inadequacy of information, cost lines of analysis, failures in constructing the satisfactory evaluative method, the closeness of observed relationships between the value and that, the analysis need for the strategic sequences of analytical time, the drivers from which problems actually is an arise. So all those things which will be in terms of an thing. So if you have any doubt, and you can ask me, the tomorrow's lesson will discuss determination of policy making, where we will understand role of legislature, executive, judiciary in policy making, role of mass media and public policy, all this thing. Okay. So, and the very, very important in the 7th chapter that we are going to discuss about, as we had in discussions in the thought process of this policy making, how it works and where it works and what are the theories which help that, where we have understand Lindbaum and incremental theory, and also that we have also understands about in Chester Bernard and Herbert Simon's decision-making theory. And the models of decision-making, there are two types of models which will be there. One is an rational model, public policy, comprehensive model, public policy. Beyond that, again, we have two other aspects of this understanding. One is that, incremental policy making, elite group theory, and all of that we had an understanding on that. Now, in the next tomorrow class, we are going to have discussions on how the legislature works, what are the roles and responsibilities of legislature, what is the executive, what it does that, and what is the judiciary, how it works, and all of that we'll try to understand in the next sessions. Until then, bye everybody. See you on tomorrow's class. Thank you. Once again, I just give you the introductions about it also. You can take it down. The next chapter, that was the 7th unit, which we are going to have understanding. In that, we are going to have understanding on legislature. I think, in the last semesters, you might have discussed about, that how the separation theory, it works out. Okay. And theory of Montesquieu have explains that how this separation of powers is very, very important. See, for example, the separation of power always creates a specialization. One man, if he does in all these works, he may not get mastery. Always there may be a chances to happen errors and a kind of disturbances and delay. So in order to avoid such kind of a latency, there is a method which have been adopted in the public administrations and the political science to make it as an work into the incremental wise. Whenever this incremental wise works, which will be then, and everything will be in set right. So in keeping in view of that, in the incremental wise, if you see that, legislature only confined its an activity to making of laws. There is no point of reason to intervene. There is no authority which is given to the legislature in terms of entertaining of any of an executive authority. Whereas, and when it comes to the point of the second organ, which is that executive, in the executive, and there are only the thing which is helps to implementations of laws. There is only that the fruits which it can be distributed among the people. Finally, the third one, if any of a making law procedure which has been committed by any kind of a mistakes, or it is running beyond the constitutional arena, that time the judiciary will have a watchdog and checks and balances it, makes it out. If the action of the legislature in terms of making of laws, which is literally is going to create any kind of further issues, then automatically the judiciary will totally abort it in order to implementation of it. Similarly, we have seen recently the Central Vista project, how the government of India working on to collapse the parliament. It was also considered as heritage of in India since in the day one. So as it is restrained by them. So in keeping in view of that, what I'm trying to tell it to you here is that it's a very, very important concept of public policy where it helps you by division of work that it can be discussed. Legislature can do its own work, executive do its work, judiciary can do its own work. So all these things, it is a part and parcel of your syllabus and all of that. And tomorrow we'll see the discussions and all of that so that you can understand all of that. So we also understand in the judiciary is about a judicial activism and judicial review. What is a judicial activism and judicial review? Judicial review is something, the authority of the court, which it can review the cases and review the past verdicts. Activism is something, there is no particular boundary to enact as an activism, such as if you could see Article 124(217) says that there shall be an appointment of a person as head of the Congress in and Karnataka. Similarly, it is also been and and used a certain method, which is a very, very important in terms of policy making and all of that. So we see legislature roles and functions, we see executive roles and function, we see judiciary roles and functions in the next class. So until then, bye-bye. Thank you so much for being in the class, and we'll see you later. Thank you.